So we're going to give this a minute to kind of get itself together like we do every presentation. And I'm going to give it a minute to log on so I can actually see things. All right, we're getting somewhere. Good morning, everybody. For those that are hopping on a little bit early, or I could just be speaking to silence, I never know. That's what this minute is for. So that's all good. One thing to fill the void, one thing I will say is that in the presentation explanation on Facebook, I was like, oh, well, with colder weather on the way, and it's gonna be 60 degrees later, 70 degrees Fahrenheit later. So so it might be a little too soon for me to say cooler weather, but one can dream, and it'll eventually get that way. I know that for sure. So we'll kind of see, but I hope you all are doing well. And I know, all right, let's see. Also, I know for those of you that live in the US, Thanksgiving is coming up, so I hope you guys have a very nice Thanksgiving as well, too, with that on the way. All right, so it's 8:30, so I'm just going to kind of hop on and we'll see who else joins along the way. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, and today we will be talking about blue jays, some birds that really really know how to announce their presence through sound or looks or just sassy attitude. So I hope you guys are ready. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to drop them because I'll be paying attention as we go through it as well too. So we got to get all that normal information out of the way. These guys are in the order Passeriformes, which is, again, all of our perching songbirds that we usually see in our backyard or in our yard when we're bird feeding, everything like that. But more specifically, these birds are in the family Corvidae, which means they're closely related to ravens, crows, magpies, and depending on where you live, rooks and jackdaws in other locations. So, fun fact, I did a presentation on crows last month, so if you happen to see that on YouTube, you can kind of consider what similarities you see between these two species. It's not going to be anything incredibly specific, but those that are in the same family do share similar characteristics in one way or another. So feel free to check that out as well too. When it comes to habitat, these guys have a pretty large year-round range. If you look at the map right here, the purple area is where you can find them year-round, while the blue area is where you can find them in their wintering habitat. So when it does get cooler, they do kind of push out west a little bit further as well too. So it does make for an interesting time there. They do prefer having mixed deciduous forests. Oh my goodness, mixed deciduous forests as well, but they often are found in the forest edges. So they do like to have some open habitat, and anywhere that has oak trees is also a really good bonus for them. Because they do like that somewhat open habitat, it is not unsurprising to find them in urban and suburban areas as well too. Now, for the year-round range, just to mention, even though for those of us in North Carolina, we're in their year-round range, you might notice you only have blue jays during a certain time of year. We have found that blue jays make no sense with their migration habits, so you have some that will migrate every year consistently, while other ones decide, no, I'm going to stay where I am year-round. This is a good area for me. So it really does depend on the individual blue jay as well, too, as to where they're moving. And through banding practices, we know that the oldest blue jay as of now found in the wild was one that was around 26 years and 11 months old. But on average, blue jays are about, get to be 7 years old as well too. Let's see. Okay, so when it comes to identification, these birds do have, it's always good to pay attention to the shape of their body because they do have a specific shape as well too. That crest is a dead giveaway for blue jays as well. It is something that can raise and lower, so keep that in mind. They do have a straight, strong bill as well too, and a longer, rounded tail. You will find that these guys are a little bit larger than robins, but not as large as crows. They're kind of in between in that area as well too. So when it comes to their colorations as well, we can of course see that they have a good mix of blues, whites, and blacks, and on their breast and belly is more of that gray and white coloration. But some specifics to take note of as well too is the black bridle that goes along their neck and on their nape as well. This can actually vary depending on individual blue jay. So while it could be a matter of perspective, if you look at these two pictures of blue jays, you'll notice that one bridle is kind of thinner on the bottom, while this one's a little bit thicker, and it kind of changes depending on perspective as well too. So each one has a slightly different bridle, which is interesting. And then as they're in flight, something to take notice of is that on their tail, while it is more of kind of like that wedge shape, they do actually have white tipped feathers as well, which gives it more of a kind of V shape as well too. So keep that in mind, and you can also notice those white tipped secondaries as well. Let's see. So somebody asked if they get blue jays in England. I'm not too sure for this specific blue jay. I think they're primarily more in North America, but there's probably jays or something similar because again, there's rooks and jackdaws over in Europe as well too. So maybe not blue jays specifically, but different types of jays as well too. Is from my best guess. I will be honest, I'm more of a local birder, so sometimes I know and sometimes I don't as to who's everywhere else as well too. All right, so let's see. Now, for blue jays in general, these guys do have a lot of different calls and vocalizations. So, a lot of us know that standard jeer or J sound, but they also do a variety of whispers, gurgles, and bill clicks too. So, they have a wide variety of song, and they're also very good at mimicry as well too. So, we're going to look at that for just a second. You know, I do my best with how these calls sound, so hopefully it's not too loud, but hopefully you can still hear it as well too. So first off is that standard J call. So it's just that standard J, J. You hear that quite often. Then you also have something that's very similar to like bubbles or like a gurgling sound. So almost kind of like a whistle. And then the whisper song is not something you'll hear pretty often, but it sounds something like this. So they certainly make a wide array of vocalizations for sure. Now, one thing that they do very well is mimicry. And so one example I'm going to give is the red-shouldered hawk that they have a tendency to mimic. So this is what a red-shouldered hawk sounds like. So that's your red-shouldered hawk call. And this is the blue jay's interpretation. Hold on, give me a sec. I got to rewind it. So it's pretty spot on, as you can tell. So they do a fantastic job mimicking. And what they'll have a tendency to do is using that mimicry, they have a tendency to kind of scare other birds off in the area or to get them, they catch them by surprise. And they'll either snag the food in the area while those birds aren't paying attention or take advantage of that in some other ways as well too. So their mimicry is very good as well. Now, for those that live in North America, you'll find that we do have quite a variety of jays in general. Here's just a few of them as well. For the most part, you're going to find any of the scrub jays. There are three different subspecies of them. The Steller's jay and the Canada jay, more in the Midwest and western side of North America as well too. Again, for those on the eastern side, the blue jay covers most of that habitat. And then for those that live down closer to Florida as well too, you guys get a fun green jay in certain locations as well. So if you're looking to do some birding, keep some of that stuff in mind. You will find again with all these species of jays, they have that similar bill shape, tail shape, and also their leg shape as well too with how they stand and their posture. Of these birds, the Steller's jay and the blue jay are the only ones that have the really prominent crests as well too. So one of my favorite facts to share is feathers in general. Feathers come in many different shapes, sizes, and colors. And one thing about the blue jay's feathers is that its blue feathers aren't actually blue. They're more of a gray. So in general, a lot of feathers get their coloration through two different ways: structure and pigmentation. In the case of the blue jay, they do have a pigmentation called melanin that's produced by the body that creates shades of black, brown, gray, reddish brown. For birds that want that brighter color, like goldfinches and cardinals, they have to eat something in their diet to produce those bright colors. Blue jays are a little bit different. Instead of adding into their diet, their feathers actually have a specific type of modified cell in the barbs, so like in the smaller pieces of the feather here. And what it does is those gray feathers have those modified cells that reflect light back to be more of a blue coloration. So if you look at this feather here, you can see how you have that blue and black color, but on the other side, you get a good look of how that gray is in that feather and how that changes from that blue to gray too. So it's really interesting as well. All right, and we'll be talking about how to attract blue jays as well later in the presentation too, so just hold on to that one for sure. So when it comes to their diet, blue jays are omnivorous, so they'll go for a variety of things like nuts, fruits, and grains, and even small vertebrates or invertebrates, and also some eggs. So sometimes they will raid the occasional nest. When they have harder food items, they'll definitely hold the food between their feet and kind of break it with their beak as well too. And one behavior that I wanted to name as well too, because it's a fun word, is kleptoparasitism. So this is actually when blue jays will steal food from other birds or other animals. They have no problem with that. That's why that mimicry sometimes comes in handy to throw other birds off guard as well too, which is really interesting to catch that behavior. But all the same, one of the food items that these birds love the most does include tree nuts, specifically acorns. They do love a lot of that. It also depends on what trees are in their nearby habitat as well too. But something that blue jays do a lot of is caching. Caching is the behavior that any animal can do, mammals, birds, all that kind of stuff, where basically they'll take the food that they're collecting and they'll store it in trees and cavities for the winter. So for a lot of you, if it's the autumn where you're autumn season where you're at, you're going to notice that a lot of activity, at least in our location, has slowed down because there's a lot of natural food that these birds are checking out. So they're using that first before they come back to the feeders, right? So these blue jays are taking advantage of this time to cache that food. Now, one of my favorite facts about blue jays as well is the fact that they have something called a gular pouch. This is basically an extended esophagus that allows them to collect more than one nut or seed at a time. So this is a really good video of that behavior in action. And a few different birds can do this as well, but basically they just knock that back and they hold it in this little pouch underneath their beak so that they can take more. So it's not unsurprising for them to hold like 3 to 5 peanuts in their mouth at a time. And for those that missed it, I'm going to play it again. It depends on the size of the seed, but it definitely makes transportation a lot easier and more efficient. And it's such a fun behavior to watch them just kind of stuff their face full of seeds and then before they move on their way. So that'll be very helpful for them in the caching process as well too. All right. So not only do they cache a lot in the fall season, but they cache thousands of seeds a year. In a study where scientists monitored 6 birds, they were actually able to notice that they cached anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 acorns in just one autumn. And of those seeds, 80 to 90% of them were viable. So blue jays are also very good at determining if a seed is good to cache. Now, blue jays and corvids in general have great memory. They're very smart and intelligent, but they're not going to get all of the seeds that they cache, and they don't always need to access those resources. So any seeds that are not eaten and left alone are able to sprout into new trees. Many tree species that blue jays are found, like oh my goodness, let me try that again. In the forest that blue jays are found, many of those tree species are dependent on blue jays for dispersal because that blue jay is able to take those seeds way farther than a tree could just drop its seeds, right? So it's actually very helpful and an efficient system. And because of this, blue jays could actually be considered something called a keystone species. This is a species in an environment that others actively rely on in that ecosystem. And when you remove them from that ecosystem, it drastically changes that location. So will it cause like the whole ecosystem to kind of crumble? Sometimes it can still persist, but it's one of those things where it makes a big impact. So it's really cool to see how just one bird can make a huge difference in their environment as well too. Let's see. Somebody's asked, do blue jays hibernate? So birds in general don't usually hibernate. For them, I don't know if there's any. From my knowledge, birds don't really hibernate. What they'll usually do is if they're good for a year-round location and they're a year-round resident, they can handle that weather regardless of what it is. And if they can't handle that weather, then they'll migrate to warmer locations that they can handle as well too. There are birds that can go into a state of torpor, which is different from hibernation, but it does kind of vary in that sense too. So overall, they do not actually hibernate. They're usually going to migrate if the weather isn't something they can handle. Goodness, excuse me. So, when it comes to behaviors, these birds are pretty social in kind of a fluid way. So, it's not unsurprising to have larger flocks turn into smaller smaller flocks and kind of change depending on the time of year and what's all going on. Most of the time, these flocks are mated pairs in the local area, and they can sometimes have little like dominance tufts in between them. They don't usually defend a really large territory. Oftentimes, if they need to defend anything, it'll be closer to nesting season and their nesting site. So it can be a little bit interesting like that as well too. These birds do a lot of communication and they move a lot with their body. So if you're also looking to identify a blue jay, look for a lot of movement and calling at the same time. They raise and lower that crest like nobody's business. They do a lot of bobbing in general. They also have a tendency to hop and bounce from place to place, so you're not going to see them walking very much. So those are all movements that kind of help determine what kind of bird you're looking at as well too. Now, elaborate displays happen as you get closer to spring and can sometimes look a little bit like this. This is one of my favorites, actually. So even something as simple as like that kind of bobbing movement is a really good display, whether it's like a courtship display or a territory display is one of those things because they can use it for multiple things. But you can notice that they're all using that behavior at the same time, possibly to get the one blue jay's attention as well too. So you'll notice more of these displays as it gets closer to spring, which of course we're just entering winter. So keep that in mind for the next year to see how that goes as well too. Let me see. So once these birds get together and they do have your mated pair for the season, they do have a tendency to stay together through multiple seasons as well too. And also something I forgot to mention is they have a lot of very cute courtship displays. They have a tendency to feed their partner, or they might do something that looks similar to kissing, which is very cute. So they will usually stay together for multiple seasons. And when they are ready for nesting, the male will gather the materials while the female builds the nest. Usually it's a cup nest that's pretty bulky, but the outside material is going to be filled with sticks, while the inside is going to be more of rootlets or possibly wet leaves that the female will kind of press down to get that really good cup shape. Depending on location, they might also use some mud as well. And if they're closer to human habitats, they will take advantage of plastic, string, paper, and even like those, oh my goodness, those plastic 6-ring yolks that are used to like, yolks, I said yolk. They're used to carry like cans of soda and things like that. Apparently they use a lot of those in those nests as well. I guess it has good rigidity for them as well. But you can see the female in here kind of pushing down on the inside to get everything settled as well too. All right. Sometimes they do reuse their old nests as well. So if it's a sturdy enough nest, they might kind of update it the next year. But if you do notice that blue jay activity, then you can kind of leave that nest up for the next season as well too. All right, so when it comes to the nesting behavior, and of course, for us currently, we're out of their nesting season, but I figure if anybody refers to these videos later, it's good information to have. For these guys, they do only have one brood per season with anywhere from 2 to 7 eggs. Their incubation and their nesting period can be a little bit longer. So again, they incubate the eggs for about 17 to 18 days, and they nest for about 17 to 21. So after those eggs hatch is when that nesting period begins. These birds do have, they are altricial, which means they're kind of blind, naked, defenseless. You can see here how small they are in comparison to the adults, but they are, their eyes are closed. They don't have any feathers except for like downy tufts, so they require the parents to keep them warm and also feed them as they continue to grow as well too. So these guys do have a slightly longer incubation and nesting period compared to some of our other oh my goodness, Passeriformes songbirds as well too. Like if we think about chickadees or bluebirds, it's just a little bit longer than theirs as well. That's okay, Jeff. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as well. And this video will be up later for anybody that's interested too. So when, my goodness, you know, sometimes you have on days and sometimes you have off days, and it's just a time today. But I digress. So when the fledglings get ready to leave the nest, they do actually hop around the nest outside of it and kind of wander away anywhere from 1 to 3 days before fledging. I will say that blue jays have a tendency to be mistaken for abandoned quite often for this behavior. So if we are ever in nesting season and you happen to notice any fledglings just kind of wandering around, it very well could be that the parents are still nearby and they just need to get back to the nest. So if you're ever concerned about a baby bird kind of like just in one area not doing much, make sure you keep an eye. If it's a safe environment, keep an eye on it for anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to kind of determine if the parents are still feeding it from a different location as well too, because that can make a difference. But once they do finally fledge, the parents will continue feeding them anywhere from 1 to 2 months after fledging. So there is a lot of support that the parents give into raising their young as well too. And something that is funny is when the fledglings do kind of wander away for a bit, the parents are like, I'm not going to feed you till you get back here, because that's a lot of effort. So oftentimes those blue jay fledglings will call quite a lot until they decide, okay, I'll come back. But one thing you'll notice for the fledglings is that they do have more of a brown or gray wash all over their body in general, so it's not as brightly colored as the adult blue jays, and they have a less defined crest because it hasn't quite grown in all the way. That and their tail doesn't quite come in as well either. Your juveniles, which are still working their way up to adulthood, do have their complete tail feathers, but you'll notice they do still have that kind of buff brown or gray color on the breast, and you can tell that the bridle is not completely distinct yet from that coloration. So that's kind of how you determine that they're the younger ones versus your adult blue jays as well. Plus another thing too is they just got a little bit of pink around the mouth still that's going to get into a darker color as it gets older as well. When it comes to attracting blue jays, these birds absolutely love whole or shelled peanuts. So if you have that as an option, feel free to offer it. Peanuts themselves, they're good to be raw or roasted, but don't include any with salt or other additives. Birds get a natural amount of salt in the wild, but when they get a large amount of it like that can dehydrate them and be a really bad time for their organs. So especially in periods of drought, we don't want to need them to get more water when it's not readily available as well. So just go raw or roasted on these. For the different types of feeders you can offer, usually it's something that has a larger coil or wire that they can just pull the peanut out of. And if you're concerned about whether or not your blue jays will or if you do or don't have that many blue jays, if your other birds will go for peanuts, woodpeckers are also a huge fan of peanuts, and even smaller birds like chickadees or titmice will be able to kind of reach into that shell, pull out the peanut, and just kind of fly off with it. So it might get a little messy with peanuts in the shell, but both are a very good option as well too. You can also do de-shelled peanuts and have those in a type of seed blend. So if you want to offer it in a standard blend, getting a feeder with a larger perching option as well too can be very helpful. So tray feeders or platform feeders, since these are larger birds in general, you can see here that they do cling really well, but they definitely have to flutter and work for it out a little bit. So having that as an option is very important as well. And of course, you've also got the hopper feeders, which basically allow for a good amount of seed to flow through the feeder, and then just having a larger perching option is very important as well. In regards to different types of seed blends, keep in mind, again, sunflower is a great base for anything, but we're going to be looking at blends that have peanuts in them. So Wild Birds Unlimited has quite a few different varieties that work well for blue jays. So the Choice blend or the Choice Plus blend are really good. Any plus blends that we carry basically have different types of fruit in them, like cherries, cranberries, raisins, or suet nuggets as well too. So that can all be very popular for blue jays. Tree Nutty blend is a blend that focuses more on peanuts and tree nuts, has some sunflower mixed in, as well as some other ingredients like the raisins and the suet nuggets as well. Or even a no mess blend, which has no shells on any of the seeds, so it's not going to sprout or make a huge mess in your yard, is a great option because it has that sunflower, peanuts, and tree nuts, which again is a great option for pretty much anybody. I like to consider no mess blend as like the fast food option in the bird world because everybody can just take it and go, and it does not require any work whatsoever on their end. And lastly, if you're really not sure about bird feeding options, then selecting a bird bath is a great option year round because, of course, in the summertime when it's hot, they'll use that to stay hydrated. But definitely in the wintertime too, you'll still see birds, of course, drinking and taking baths in this type of weather, especially when it gets cooler. Because when they bathe, that keeps their feathers clean, which allows for good heat retention, which keeps them warmer in the event that the weather does get cooler over time. So all of those are really good options to have. Again, blue jays are going to be closer to more wooded locations. If you have woods nearby you, there's definitely the chance that they could stop by. And if you do have areas with oak trees as well in them, then you're kind of in good sorts, and chances are you will see a blue jay sooner or later for sure. But one thing that is really fun to do, and this is just in general with like migration or your summer versus winter birds, is keep track of when you see certain birds. So whether that's taking a photo and having it saved in your memory for like on the phone, not like in your head, and having it saved for like next year so you can check it out. Can be very helpful because a lot of birds have a tendency to pass through the same area around the same time of year each year. So, for example, like rose-breasted grosbeaks always migrate through North Carolina sometime in late April, May. My coworker Sarah Beth has a picture where each month, consistently, in that time period, there's always a grosbeak around the same time of year in that same day. So blue jays are a similar way. Mark down when you see them so you have an idea if you have them throughout the year or just through the winter season or when it's colder or when it's warmer. You never know until you kind of actually keep track and kind of see how everything flows together too. So keep that in mind as well as you're moving forward and figuring out what birds you have in your yard. There's still a little bit of migration happening, so it'll be fun to see when we get all of our winter residents in the area as well. So with that being said, for those of you that are by the store or want to make an order today, we do have a coupon code or a coupon. The coupon code is J for an order off of, oh my goodness, talking is hard. It's a coupon for $5 off a $25 purchase of more. The coupon code is J. It's available today either in store or through phone order as well. And of course, we'll have a second viewing of this presentation at 11 too, if you know anybody that wants to stop by. These are the resources that I used as well too, and I think I'll include them somewhere if I haven't already. But basically, the Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great resource that allows people to take a look at photos, video, audio that people from around the world have kind of posted there as well too, and you also can do that as well. And it basically gives people a really good idea on different types of birds around the world and how they work as well too, and the different types of behaviors. Allaboutbirds.org is a great resource for bird identification, and of course getting a succinct list of all of those audios or video or photos as well too. So definitely feel free to check that out as well. Cornell Lab of Ornithology also has some great info on feather diagrams too, so I'll be sure to include some of that information as well somewhere, eventually, for sure. With that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. For those that live in the US, we are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving soon, so I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday. Happy Thanksgiving. I know I have lots to be thankful for even in these chaotic times, and I'm sure many of you do feel the same way. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and this is actually one of the things I'm thankful for. So thanks so much. I appreciate your time. I hope you guys learned a lot. Enjoy the birds, and I will see you next time. Bye.